Israel is burning. The culprit? Netanyahu and his far-right government. Violence, clashes and anger is on display as Israelis protest their elected representatives. Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post, our weekly special where we bring you all things big in West Asia. I'm your host, Ghadi Francis, and before we break down the unprecedented developments in Israeli politics, let's take a quick look at what's making the headline across the region.
Saudi Arabia summons Danish envoy over Quran burning incident. Officials deliver protest note urging an end to what they call disgraceful acts that can fuel hatred between religions. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan hosts Palestine's Mahmoud Abbas in Ankara. The two leaders discuss intra-Palestine reconciliation ahead of the crucial meet between the Fatah Party and Hamas. Jordanian parliament approves cybercrime bill despite warning from rights groups and civil society that it threatens free speech. Activists continue to protest in southwestern Turkish forest against felling of trees to make way for a coal mine. 14 detained as police cracks down on those protesting.
What Israelis feared for 29 weeks finally played out this week. It is the start of a chain that could possibly divide Israel for good. The Knesset has cleared out the first part of the judicial bill. This sparked violence and flared frustrations. We tell you the full story.
Benjamin Netanyahu began his best-selling autobiography with the story of a daring special forces raid he took part in. It was to free Israeli passengers from a hijacked airliner in 1972, an event that helped shape his hawkish image during more than 3 decades in politics. Now it is one of the ironies surrounding Israel's longest-serving prime minister. Within weeks of beginning his record 6th term in office, one of his signature policies, an overhaul of the judiciary, caused such tensions in the army that his defense chief warned national security was at risk. "29 weeks of protest did not stop Netanyahu. Chants on the streets made no dent to his coalition agenda. This week, the Israeli government passed the first part of its judicial reform, a controversial bill that has effectively divided the Israeli society, a reform that has sparked the biggest democratic crisis in Israeli history since 1948. At the center of the storm is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The leader is accused of steering his country down a calamitous path that threatens democratic values and ideals of unity on which it was built. Temperatures in the Israeli parliament ran high this Monday. The government had approved the first ratification of the overhaul, one that strips the judiciary of its power. The bill passed by the ultra-nationalists in power prevents Israel's High Court of Justice from using the reasonableness standard to strike down government decisions. A grim moment for Israel, the country that has for long sought to hold itself as the democratic ideal in West Asia. This seems like a beginning of a crisis that might become a pivotal point in Israeli history.
No pass for me, it's just the first step of so much that's happening. It makes me really, really sad about what's happening in this country. I made Aliyah 7 years ago, and it's the first time I actually felt so sad to see what's happening. You see, the atmosphere on the streets is just, everyone's so angry.
There is anger on the streets, frustrations playing out in open. Thousands have blocked highways, doctors are threatening damaging strikes. The reservists have denied duty. Wherever you see, there is chaos, there is violence, there are clashes. The government is seemingly ignorant of the crisis. Netanyahu, in his remarks after the bill was passed, said that is what Israel needed and that it was only democratic to do so.
Today, we carried out a necessary democratic step. The step was aimed at restoring a degree of balance between the authorities, which was the case 50 years ago, when judges did not have the ability to strike down government decisions they deemed not to be reasonable. We passed the amendment on reasonability so that the elected government can carry out policies in line with the decisions of the majority of the citizens of the country.
From Israeli opposition leaders to Israeli citizens, even its overseas allies, the move has hardly been welcomed by anyone.
It was unfortunate that the vote today took place with the slimmest possible majority. We understand talks are ongoing and likely to continue over the coming weeks and months to forge a broader compromise, even with the Knesset in recess, and we will continue to support the efforts of President Herzog and other Israeli leaders as they seek to build a broader consensus through political dialogue.
The political crisis can also impact Israel economically. After the vote was cleared, Morgan Stanley lowered Israel's sovereign credit to a dislike stance. Moody's Investor Service also cautioned that the country's economy faces negative consequences. It warned of significant risk after the latest vote, but the Israeli leader disagrees. Simcha Rotman heads the Knesset Law and Justice Committee. He says the overhaul has no impact on the Israeli economy.
Economy is stronger than riots. Economy is stronger than legislation. The economy in Israel is good, having all the strength of the Israeli brain, of the Israeli system, of the Israeli workforce, of the Israeli long-term investments.
The Israeli Supreme Court says it will not block the legislation. It says the debate will be held in September as planned. The government meanwhile says it is open to negotiations with the opposition, but those standing against it rule out his overtures. Former Prime Minister and opposition leader Yair Lapid called it an empty show, claiming Netanyahu has no authority. While the protest continues, the government will be seeking a vote on controlling judicial appointments once Knesset is out of recess. They want Parliament to have the ability to override decisions by the Supreme Court to strike down legislation. Netanyahu in the past has said that he has no intention to push with the latter. But critics are suspicious. They fear Netanyahu, who in an attempt to come to power brought together a far-right coalition, might not be calling the shots. Observers say Netanyahu's greed for power can possibly push Israel to a civil war.
Well, this week the news of wildfires and heat waves have been coming from all across the world. But in particular, the Mediterranean coast has really been hit hard from Italy to Greece. While in West Asia, the Mediterranean part, Syria and Turkey were hit as well, from Latakia to Mashqita to other parts of the region. Heat waves and fires even added up to the woes of the people living here. Take a look.
Syria is a country ravaged by decades of war. For the last couple of years, it was barely getting by economically. And now, to add to its misery, the scorching mercury and heat wave, including wildfires, are wreaking havoc. For weeks, locals have been scrambling to find affordable ways to survive temperatures as high as 40 degrees Celsius, lining up to fill water containers, purchasing ice blocks to help cool down, are all efforts that seem to be in vain.
The temperature is exceeding 42 degrees Celsius. We're dying from the heat. We're transporting water under the heat at 60 years old.
But this is not even the worst of Syria's problems. The countryside is battling raging wildfires in Idlib and Aleppo. Forest fires have burned down refugee camps, killing 3 children and injuring several other war-displaced Syrians. Since the beginning of July, civic responders have been trying to put out over 280 wildfires, but efforts of firefighters have been hindered by severe lack of equipment. Years of conflict and Western sanctions have made import of adequate machinery impossible.
For more than a decade, we have suffered from wars. There is also an economic blockade that prevents us from getting fire engines and agricultural equipment, which has also allowed fires to spread and get out of control.
The active wildfires have caused local farmers to suffer huge losses. The fires have destroyed over 430 square kilometers of land, burning everything in sight, from produce of olives, apples, grapes to fig trees and more. With little to no equipment to douse the flames, the fires will continue to turn lives and livelihood to ash. But Syria is not the only West Asian nation on fire. In neighboring Turkey, over 180 hectares of land is up in flames. Wildfires in Turkey have put the country's prime travel and tourism hotspots in danger. These visuals are from the Turkish Riviera, where firefighters are moving heaven and earth to protect prime resorts and infrastructure from turning to ash. More than 600 firefighters and 40 aircrafts have been deployed since fires started on July 24th. And Russia has also come to help its friend in need. The country sent 2 amphibious airplanes to help tackle fires and save Turkey's resorts from the blaze. There is no denying that climate change is real, as countries in West Asia see the worst of nature's wrath. A lot of questions loom over long-term solutions to rising temperatures and uncontrollable wildfires.
The United Nations has begun work on the Yemeni oil tanker situation. For years now, the crisis-battered country has been fearing a ticking ecological bomb, one that is decaying off its shore. Now, a high-stakes operation is underway to remove over 1 million barrels of oil from the Yemeni coast. Listen in.
Yemen is facing the world's worst humanitarian crisis. In the midst of war, poverty, and hunger, the United Nations is trying to stop an environmental catastrophe from happening. This is the mighty oil storage vessel FSO Safer. It is anchored in the Red Sea north of the Yemeni city of Al Hudaydah. Safer has been corroding for years, with no maintenance to keep it from exploding and spilling gallons of oil into the sea. But the UN has undertaken a mammoth task of transferring oil from this rotting tanker.
In the absence of anyone else willing or able to perform this task, the United Nations stepped up and assumed the risk to conduct this very delicate operation. The ship-to-ship transfer of oil, which has started today, is the critical next step in avoiding an environmental and humanitarian catastrophe on a colossal scale.
The operation, though long overdue, is a complex one. Yemen's Houthi rebels, who control the coastal region, had suspended maintenance work since they seized the area in 2015. In November 2020, after long negotiations, the Houthis agreed to allow UN to secure the tanker and salvage it. In May this year, a crew of experts worked to make oil transfer a secure process. After almost 2 months of preparation, the transfer process began on the 25th of July. Experts say the procedure to shift 1.12 million barrels of oil is expected to take 19 days to complete. This is the first time the UN has undertaken a mission of this nature. But the stakes were too high for the international body to not step in. Officials have been warning of the risks of oil spills for years now. It is feared that the safer tanker could spill 4 times as much oil as the 1989 Exxon Valdez disaster near Alaska. And the cost of cleanup would be monstrous, $20 billion. Not to forget, an oil spill of this magnitude could spell disaster, wiping out the world's largest marine ecosystem.
Primary security threats have been fully mitigated in this case. The primary issue, of course, is that this is a country still at war, civil war, but also within the region. And that causes a great deal of distrust and a lot of more scrutiny from a security point of view.
The UN has so far raised $123 million to seeing this operation through. But once the transfer is complete, a few complications still cloud this issue. 1. Oil residue in the safer vessel still has the potential to cause large-scale damage if it explodes, before it can be safely scrapped and transported away. 2. It is yet undecided if and when the oil will be sold and who can be the potential buyer.
West Asia marks Ashura. It is a very significant time of the Islamic calendar that happens on 10th of Muharram month. Why is it significant? What is its history? This report will tell you.
عليك بدل الدموع دما وأنتم في حرم العباس.
Muslims in West Asia are marking Muharram. It is the first month of the Islamic calendar among the sacred 30-day period where warfare is forbidden. And in it falls the day of Ashura. A religious event falls on the 10th day of Muharram. These are Shia men observing Ashura, some dressed in black, some shirtless, as they mourn the death of the Prophet's grandson. Ashura marks the day when Imam Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, and his followers were killed in the Battle of Karbala in 680 AD. They were surrounded by the much larger forces of the Caliph Yazid, a ruler from the Umayyad period. Despite being outnumbered, Shias believe that a group of brave men stood against injustice and tyranny. During Ashura, Shia Muslims engage in various mourning rituals. It is their expression of deep grief and a way to honor the sacrifices made by Hussein and his companions. They hold processions throughout the streets where mourners chant and recite poems mourning the dead. Street dramas are performed to reenact the events of Karbala and remind people of the bravery and sacrifices. While the divide between the Shias and the Sunnis has persisted for centuries in various forms, Sunnis observe the day of Ashura as a day of fasting to commemorate the day Noah left the ark and the day when Moses miraculously crossed River Nile to escape Egypt. The Battle of Karbala is considered a turning point in Islamic history. Shias see Hussein and his descendants as the rightful heirs to the Prophet. His killing at the hands of a rival Muslim faction embodies the rift between the Sunnis and Shia sects. It continues to shape the identity of the minority branch of Islam.
Our last report for today is one of hope. Hawra al-Jufayri broke all barriers by becoming the first female sailor in Bahrain. Now, this was not easy for Hawra. It didn't come without hurdles from her family and her society. We tell you about her story.
I wanted to try like something different. As I like the sea, I like being in the sea, I like being on the water. So I decided like I want to be unique. I want to do something different. That's when I decided that okay, I'm gonna take the boat license.
Hawla was working in a smaller company on a smaller scale, and we found her very capable and have the potential to become maybe in the future a master captain marine. So we have taken the first step by employing her, dedicate the team to train her, support her to get the education and the license required, and within 3 months as a company, as a team, we succeed to see the first Bahraini woman as a marine captain.
That's all we have for you on this edition of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week in the same time in the same place. I am your host, Ghadi Francis, signing off from Beirut, Lebanon. Until then, keep on watching WION. World is One.